Hello, dear students. I welcome you all in my lecture on friend functions in C++. Okay, what is the need to have a friend function? Simply, we want to share our data with a function that is a non-member function, which means we want to share data with a standalone function that does not belong to our class. This is mostly used in operator overloading. Let us see the access modifiers which are available in C++ that are public, protected and private. The visibility of the data or function within the class is open. Either your data or functions are declared as private, protected or public. They are all visible within the class. To the classes or functions that is outside, which means these classes are not linked with our class, which means there is no inheritance, or simply any global function or a function of any class that does not belong to us can only view the public entities. Protected and private are hidden, they are encapsulated and they are not available to the outsiders. Similarly, once we create a subclass, the visibility to this of the subclass is for the public and protected entities. Even our subclasses are not allowed to access the private data or functions. Now what if I want to share my private and protected data to some outside functions? Because the outsider can only view the public data. Protected and private are kept encapsulated and they are not available for the outsiders. But what if I want to share this data with some outside function? It can be a global function. So this function can access the private and the protected members of my class. Therefore, I can not only share the public data, even I can share the private data. Then I need to declare that function as a friend of mine class, and in that sense we are going to give access to all the data members, either private or public, to that particular function. We can make a single function as a friend, or we can also add an entire class as a friend of our class. Okay, what is basically a friend function is? As we discussed earlier, that this function is a non-member function, which means this is not a function of my class. It can be a global function, it can be a function of some other class, but a friend function is basically a non-member function. It does not belongs to our particular class or to any particular class. It's friend function. So it's a non-member function that will be accessing the private and the protected members of a specific class. Therefore, we are going to grant access to all the private members of the class. What we need to do, we simply need to declare that function as a friend within my class, so that the compiler can know that whenever the call is made or the function try to access the memory, the compiler will going to allow, because it has been declared as friend within that particular class. The definition of the function must be kept outside the class body, so it cannot become a member function. So if you want to differentiate between a member function and a friend function, so we simply explain, or we simply express that the member function is always called with the reference of the object, because the member function is a permanent member of that class. On the other hand, a friend function is a non-member function, and it will be called directly from the main, which means the friend function never needs any reference to be called. It will be called as a standalone simple function. Now, what is the syntax? Step 1, we need to define the function anywhere outside the class. Second, we need to provide a declaration of that function as a friend in my class, so that the class or the compiler knows that whenever this function will going to access my data, the compiler won't going to stop it. It will going to allow to access my data. We can place this declaration either in the private area or in the public area. The private or public specifier will not going to work on friend, and the only reason is that this function is not available in my class. So when the function is not available in my class, it doesn't matter whether it has been placed in private or in public, because this is just a declaration. The definition already is placed outside the class. So look at the syntax. How you are going to declare the syntax? First, we need to provide a keyword, the specifier, that is friend, and then we are going to provide the signature of the function, that is the return type, name. And remember, as an argument, we always need to pass an object of the class in which this function is basically declared as a friend. Why we need to pass the object? Because the function is placed somewhere outside the class, and to access the memory, it always need the address of that particular object where the data has been kept. How this function will going to know that where this particular object is being placed in the memory? Therefore, we always need to place, or we need to pass object as a reference, so that the function can get the address from where the data can be fetched. Fine. So remember first that the friend specifier only comes with the declaration, which means we just want to place the friend specifier within the class when the function is being declared, and it is not used when the function is defined, which means with the body of the function we never place the keyword friend, because that function is a standalone function. It is a friend of that particular class, the class in which this function is being declared. So we are going to use the friend specifier only when we are declaring the function, whereas the definition will not contain any friend specifier. So the first property that we need to remember while using friend functions, the first property is to declare the function as a friend within the class. This is the first property while we are using the friend function. Second, we always need to pass the object of the class as a parameter, so that the function can access the memory of that particular object. So there are two rules to follow. First, we need to declare the function within the class as a friend, and rule number 2 is to pass the object as a parameter to that particular friend function. Now look at the example. We create a class phone, and in the private area we are going to define an attribute IMEI, that is the number of your phone device. In the public area we are going to declare a constructor, a parameterized constructor that will going to accept a number and assign that number to the IMEI attribute of the class. Now I'm going to declare a function that is get IMEI, and it will going to accept an object of type phone, and it is basically a friend function for this class, and the class is being closed. So we have performed the first rule, that is we have declared a friend function within a class, and the rule number 2 is to pass the object. So rule number 2 is also satisfied, that we have passed an object of phone to this particular function. Now the class is closed, and now I'm going to define function outside the class, and this is my function, and the function will going to print the IMEI number of any object of type phone that is passed to this particular function. So now the important thing to understand and observe is that we are accessing IMEI number, that is a private attribute of an object outside the class. This is the important thing to observe, that a function that is a non-member function is accessing the private member of my class. Even the object is not allowed to access its private member outside the class. Let us execute this code and see what's happened. Look, this is my class. We've declared IMEI as an attribute. Then we have a constructor, and then we have a friend function. This is the declaration, just a declaration. We've declared this function and place a semicolon. This is just a declaration, and this declaration will help my class or the compiler to identify the call at the runtime, that whenever this particular function will try to access the memory of my object, it will be allowed, because it is declared as friend within the class. In the main, we are creating an object E. It's a type of phone, an object of phone, and we have passed the EMI number, and then we have this function. We have called this function from the main, get IMEI, and we have passed this particular object E. So this E will be received with this particular function at line number 19, and then it will going to print the IMEI number is stored within this particular object. Let's compile this code, and there is no error and warning, which means the code is compiled. Okay, if we execute this, we can see that the IMEI number is being printed. The IMEI number is printed, which means that we have access the data, the private data, outside the object. That is the important thing to observe. Look, this is the output. the IM number has been printed. Okay, so I hope this is clear. Now there is a question that why we have declared a friend function. We can also perform this by declaring any function and by passing the object, like we've passed this object to this get IMEI function. We can pass this object to any other function, and because this function is also using the reference, so it will be printed. Let's check. Let's create another function, like we create a function test and we passed an object of the class, and let's see whether we can print or we can access this data. Fine. So test is again not a member function, and it is not a friend, even not a friend of the class. Just to make it clear that some students think that because we are passing the object to this friend function and then we are printing this private data, that is IMEI number, with the help of the reference that is being passed. So if the object is passed to any function, we can easily print or we can get the data. Let's see. We compile this and we encountered the error. What is the error? The error is that IMEI is private. Look, because the object itself cannot access any data that is private outside the class. The concept is that the private data is not even available to its own object outside the class. So I hope the concept is clear, that by just passing the object, we cannot access the private data, but if we have declared that function as a friend function, it has the ability, it has the power to access the private data of the object outside the class. This is something that the object even can't perform, because we have seen in this particular case that the object cannot access private data, but the friend function accesses the private data of the class outside the class. Okay. Now, what if I'm going to change the value? Let us create another function, that is friend function, void, we name it as edit, and it will going to edit the phone number. Again, it's a friend function. Function has been declared within the class with a friend qualifier, first rule. Second, we have passed an object of type phone to this particular function so that it can easily access any given object. Okay, outside the main, now we are going to declare a function edit, and we are going to change the IMEI number. Okay, we created a new function that is edit, and it will going to assign this particular number, that is 111111, to the IMEI number. Let's compile the code, and the code is compiled successfully. So therefore we can easily change the IMEI number. We can also call like edit. So first we print the IMEI number, then we call edit. Look that on the line number 19 we have called get IMEI, and we are calling these functions directly as a standalone function. No reference is called. We are not calling it like e dot something. Okay, if you write e dot, so you can get the definition get IMEI, but it is a function, but this function is a friend function. You cannot call using the reference because there is only the declaration in the class, so they are called directly. These are standalone functions, and then we are going to change. Look, we are going to change it, and we compile this code. The code will be compiled, yes, which means we can easily change the IMEI number, and then again we are going to print the IMEI, and let's see what happens. So the code is executed, and wait, we again execute the same code. So the IMEI number is this. Then we call the edit function, and then again we call the same function, and it returns me the same number, which means that the IMEI number is not changed. Why? Why this happens? Because we have, when we have passed this e to this edit function at line 20, this function is called, and we received p. This e, the address of e, is held by this object, that is p, and it's a local variable. It will be created when the object is called. Then the IM number is changed, and as the function is over, this p is also finishes from the memory. So what if I'm going to pass the reference? For example, I'm going to pass the address of the object rather than the object itself, and then I'm going to receive this as an address, which means now it's a pointer. So the code is compiled. Let's execute it. And see what happens. Look, IMEI number is this previously, then we call the function added, and the new number is 111111, and it has changed the value of my private variable. So the important thing to observe is that we are playing with the private data members of a class outside the class. So this is basically the power of using friend functions. And let us summarize the lecture. So remember that a friend function is a non-member function. It is not in the scope of the class. It is somewhere outside the class. Therefore, we are not going to call this function using the object reference. It will be called directly as a standalone function. And there are two things to remember. First, that we need to declare the function within the class as a friend. We can declare it either in the private area or in the public area. And then second, rule number 2, we always need to pass object as an argument to this friend function, and this object is passed just to provide the function with the address of the object where the data has been kept, so that the function can easily access that memory and uses that data. And in the example we have seen that we can easily play and perform any operation on the private data outside the class when a friend function is being declared. So I hope the video will help you in understanding the concept of friend functions. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.